Hey, it's Jesse Moss from iHeartRadio here with Jake and Danny from Greta Van Fleet. We're here to talk about the new album, The Battle at Gardens Gate. Now, I saw on Josh's Instagram, actually, when you guys were recording that first album, Tom Hanks shows up, approves the record, and then you guys released it. Did you guys have any A-list celebrities in the studio?
Yeah, it was interesting. There was a bunch of people in and out of Henson where we were doing the record, and so I think Justin Bieber was next door for a while. Then Elon Musk came in for a couple of weeks, and then we'd bump into people in the hallway all the time. John Mayer was in there. Mary Clayton was in there that we bumped into. Who's the country guy? The Australian. Oh, Keith Urban was there. Yeah. We bumped into him. So there's a bunch of people. Very LA, sort of circumstance.
Now, I know you guys have been a band for a while now. A lot of people know who you guys are, especially in the rock world. Everybody knows who you guys are. Is that weird to you guys yet? Like, walking in, seeing a Justin Bieber, a Keith Urban, and Elon Musk. Like, is that normal to you guys yet, or do you still get a little starstruck?
It's definitely a little weird. It's just a world that we're not quite used to. But it does help, when they at least know who we are. So you can kind of break that wall of awkward introductions, and at least you're both at the end of the day musicians sharing the space.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's very cool.
We're obviously in the middle of a pandemic. The whole world is feeling this. I'm in the basement of my house right now talking to you guys, which is a little out of the norm. My grandfather's upstairs watching my kids, so hopefully they don't run in and interrupt this interview. But, for the pandemic, obviously you guys have had like touring sidelined and the live show sidelined. But do you feel like the pandemic made this record a little bit different than it would have been if the pandemic wasn't going on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it offered a lot. I think as soon as we were ready, we basically had finished recording the record last summer, and we were ready to release it, much earlier on. And then, things had sort of set in that it was that a pandemic was going on. So we kind of had to reevaluate how we were going to, put the record out. And we actually had started writing a new album, and we'd come up with a lot more material, and we actually, we're looking at the material and going, well, this sounds exactly like something that should be on the Battle at Gardens Gate. It doesn't sound like a new record. It sounds like we're still stuck on this album, and so then you gain the Barbarians and Caravel. So it was interesting. It was. I think so. I think it contributed a lot to the album, and it was quite interesting in that way.
It's cool because you guys kind of just like burst onto the rock and roll scene. Everybody knows who you guys are now. Everybody's excited to see this album. And from a radio guy's perspective that lives in Canada, it felt like nobody knew who Greta Van Fleet was, and then all of a sudden out here in Canada, everybody knew who you guys were. I know it wasn't an overnight success. You guys were doing house parties, and you guys were playing all over Michigan, getting the hype that you guys deserved. But did it feel kind of like an overnight success where you guys had nobody knowing who you were outside of your hometown to just like the entire world knowing who Greta Van Fleet was?
A little bit, honestly. It had a lot to do with all the touring that we were doing for 2.5 straight years, and I always say that it was the longest, shortest period of time ever, because it's 2.5 years, but you don't really have much time to think about what's going on during all of it. You're just kind of living every moment. So at the end of the day, it really did feel like an overnight sort of thing. But it definitely wasn't.
Yeah, it was years in the making, I suppose. It's like a lot of people have said, I mean, I think we kind of arose to the sort of challenge when we came onto the scene. It was really quick for us. It was, sort of, we were elevated really quickly. But I think what a lot of people don't necessarily know is that we had been playing for so many years before we'd ever really been prevalently in the public's eyes. We had been playing, bars and biker shows and gigs for, years prior to really coming into the public scene of music, I guess.
And Jake, you guys mentioned you guys have been playing together for years, and I know you guys have been a band for quite some time, and you got a bunch of brothers in the band with you. At what point did you guys realize, that this was going to be more than just making racket in the basement and annoying your parents, that maybe you guys actually had something that the world would love, as we obviously do now?
Tough to kind of pinpoint that.
Yeah.
I suppose as a whole, it was kind of, as soon as we would book tours out months in advance, and we always had a couple week-long tours at times. But I realized it was a serious sort of gig when we had an entire year booked out worth of tours, and the venues just started gradually escalating in capacity and size and significance too. So it really was just like that first year, maybe 2018, where it really started to set in and feel real.
Yeah, I would say it's fascinating to consider that we never set out to conquer the world or anything. It was just sort of like we were just playing music together, and blues music and rock and roll music, because it's something that we all loved to do and something that we all sort of were afforded in growing up. And I suppose we became aware of the fact that maybe we're professional musicians all of a sudden one day. It wasn't something that was sort of empirically changing throughout time. I think it was like, wow, we're here now, and we're sort of, I think this year especially has given us that sort of perspective, that insight, because we've been touring for so long, so rigorously over the last 3 years, that all of a sudden your mind can quiet and you're no longer in the eye of the storm per se. You kind of can digest what's going on, and I think that's kind of where we're at now. It's been a very interesting ride thus far.
Is it different, writing music when people know who you are, as opposed to writing music when you're trying to be heard, when nobody knows who you guys are, and you're just like, nobody's in bands walking the street? Does your songwriting process change when you feel like you've got something to prove to people because you are so well known now?
I suppose in theory it probably should, but whenever we're writing, we often distance ourselves from the rest of the world, and that's where we find ourselves most productive. We always try to seek out, little plots of land that we can just be ourselves, acres of land where we're just kind of alone. And when we're writing, we're so fixated on the music and the art itself that we don't really think about anything else. And maybe that hinders us, but I think it's rather productive.
Yeah, I think that's always been about part of our process, really. I mean, the world, the world around us sort of melts away. I think when we're creating, I think we really, I would say that not a whole lot of external perspective shapes our music as much so as we ourselves kind of go inside of our minds and our creative selves and craft something together.
I poured a glass of whiskey and I just kind of like shut the world out, and I just listened through it a couple times, and I thought it was awesome. And one thing that I noticed after seeing you guys live a few times over the years in different parts of Canada, I was like, you know what, this is going to be a big album to see live. You got, organ, strings, the guitar, the bass, the drums, you got the whole deal. Have you guys written this album, with plans for like a massive, big arena kind of tour? Is that what you guys are planning when we're allowed to go back to shows again?
I guess a little bit. When we started getting the ball rolling for this album, we kind of realized it was heading in a very cinematic, sort of massive sounding direction, and we kind of wanted to execute that throughout the rest of the recording process. But we always often write in a live setting. We're maybe not physically on stage, but we're all together in a room. So when we're writing music, it's kind of designed to be played live, and I think a product of touring for 2 and 3 years straight has kind of allowed our music to lean in that direction of big, stadium rock and roll type, a lot of sound, a lot of room to fill in the sound.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, like Danny said, it's whatever the music asks for, you kind of bring to the table. So if it was like, the production sort of representing this album and the type of touring that would represent this album and the type of performance that the four of us would be, representing this album, it just is such a big and dense sound that I think a lot of that stuff would definitely be there.
A few years ago, you wrote song, recently over this pandemic, and I saw The Heat Above, the first song off your record, that was written, way back when, and obviously it's a big hit, and it's going to be a big hit on this record. How do you guys keep a song like that under wraps and not get way too excited to release it to the world. Like I know as a creative person myself, if I come up with a cool idea, I'm like, everybody has to see this, whether it's finished or not. And you guys are, you know, writing amazing songs that nobody hears of for years and years and years. Is that tough for you guys to have a song so good that you love so much that you just keep in the dark for so long?
I think the toughest part about that is we all just like to keep moving in general, in a general sense. You know, like touring, we love it because it's constant chaos and we just like to keep ourselves busy. So that was a tough struggle this year, you know, especially the fact that we couldn't do anything else to kind of keep our minds busy. We had a lot of stuff. I think it's definitely the most material we've ever released on an album before. And, you know, with the anticipation of getting out and playing it live, and it just took so long. We've been working on the album for almost 2 years. It was actually pretty tough, at least for me.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that. I think it's interesting. I mean, in the sense that you can sort of create a song and then you really want to get that out right away and you're excited for people to hear it and you're always curious what they're going to think. I think for us, there's this shelf, you know, that you know, amounts, you know, songs and songs and songs. But I think the interesting part about, you know, capping some of the excitement to be able to constantly be putting music out is that we're constantly writing songs. And there's always this sort of evolution and this natural flow of, okay, well, I can forget about these songs because we're working on this right now. And then, you know, when that's ready, you go to the next one and you're focused on that. So there's this sort of this chain or cycle of focus in that sense.
You know, when I was listening to your record, and don't take this the wrong way because it's not a bad thing, I felt like you guys did whatever you wanted, no matter what anyone was going to say with this record. And I say that because from a radio perspective, you know, the first thing bands, when they come onto the scene and they want to write a song and they want it to be a hit on the radio, they keep it to like 2 to 3 minutes, just so it'll get played. It's quick, it's in, it's out. And you know, you guys got 9-minute songs. You got a bunch of long ass songs in there. I feel like you guys made a record that you guys wanted to make. You didn't care what anyone was going to say about it. And this was like a record for you. Did you guys learn anything writing this record differently than the last records or EPs you put together? Like, did you feel you didn't have to cater to anyone with this record?
A little bit. Everyone keeps asking about the whole sophomore album sort of, you know, the pressure behind releasing this album. It's so important. And honestly, we had never really even stopped to think about the fact that this was going to be our second album. And we were just, you kind of hit the nail on the head with, this is an album we've always wanted to make. And, you know, it was the fact that, like what Jake was saying earlier, Greg was very genuinely excited about the direction of the album, and just, you know, in conversation with him, that I think we all just had a lot of freedom in writing this album, and it felt really good. I think that's important as a musician. Yeah.
I got 2 more questions for you guys before I let you go. You know, before this pandemic started, you guys were going to go on a South American tour with Metallica. That had to be unbelievable for you guys. One of the, you know, the godfathers of rock and heavy rock for you. That obviously didn't happen yet. Is there any plans for another tour with those guys when all this shit clears up?
There are.
Yeah, I think so. They've rescheduled South America
and then rescheduled.
Yeah. So that's still rescheduled. And then I think, yeah, there's even plans to go to Australia with the guys. I mean, they were talking about, because it's been so long since anybody's been able to put on a show. But yeah, I mean, it's an exciting thing. I think out of anybody that we would have been able to open for, then, you know, someone brought up Metallica and they said they got, you know, Metallica wants to take you guys on tour. And it was like one of the, I think it's one of those really big moments, because again, that's a band that we have like extreme level of respect for. So we're still anticipating, you know, being able to go and tour with Metallica at some point.
We have a lot of cleanup to do in this world first.
That's right.
I was listening to your album last night, drinking blackened whiskey, Metallica's whiskey. I thought it was pretty fitting. My last question for you guys, you know, I used to live on the border of Detroit. I used to live like London, Waterloo area. I also lived on the border of New York and Canada. Tim Hortons is a huge thing. I know Tim Hortons is in Michigan, where you guys are from as well. Who has better Tim Hortons, Canada or America? And I already know what the answer is going to be.
It's gonna be Canada.
Absolutely.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah.
Hey, this is Danny.
And this is Jake from Greta Van Fleet.
Listen to our music from our new album, The Battle at Garden's Gate, on iHeart New Music.